Oi, oi, it's your boy, Jack Slack, coming at you on Monday the 10th of January. And unfortunately, fights haven't started again yet. They are starting again the coming weekend. We'll get into that on the previews podcast, the Boycast, Wednesday, Thursday. But today, I thought we'd do something sort of like year-ends awardy, but not year-ends awardy because I did my year-end awards last time. But a little bit of a different subject because my year-end awards are things like, most, smartest game plan, most improved fighter, things like that. And I thought rather, I don't want to do like best fight or whatever, or best knockout, but I did want to find a way to put some shine on some fights that I know that a lot of people won't have watched, even within my fairly niche audience. So what we're doing today is something I've decided to call bangers and clangers, because I regularly refer to things as bangers or clangers. Bangers are good fights. Clangers are not bad fights, but fights that were supposed to be good that then turned out bad. So, for instance, Leah McCourt versus Jessica Borger was this year. That was a Bellator co-main event in London, and it was genuinely, without exaggeration, the worst fight I've ever seen. I was watching that and going, who the hell are these lasses? How did they get here? What are you doing, Bellator? And then remembering it was Bellator and being a little bit more lenient because it's just run by idiots. But that's not really a clanger in the sense that I'm talking about, because a clanger is something that I got excited for, and then it just went off like a clang in a steel pot. Bangers, obviously good for, if you have a great fight lined up and it turns out great, that is a banger. But for today's episode, I want to focus on bangers, particularly from places that people won't have seen, or, certainly people who are the real shit-eating wild men of this podcast might have forgotten. So to get us started, let's do a banger, something positive. I talked about this one a couple of times recently, but it came up the other day when someone was asking about, who is the next Matt Brown. And I said, obviously, Chito Vera, probably front runner. You've got a couple of guys doing more interesting clinch stuff. But I said, Julian Arosa's last performance, which was against Charles Jourdain, was surprisingly Brown-esque. Jourdain, obviously, back in the day, everyone was like, oh, Air Jourdain, he's going to flying knee everyone. Big kicker, likes his fancy, flashy kicks and jumps and knees and shit. Most recently, you'll remember him beating the shit out of Andre Ewell in the last round of their fight. That was in December. He should have he should have changed his name to Andre Ewell, like Yule Tide or Yule Log, just for that fight. I think that would have been great. But in this Arosa Jourdain fight, one of the things I really loved was that Arosa was walking him down when Jourdain, it wasn't constant like Matt Brown, so Jourdain would come bursting off the fence and crack him occasionally. And that's the thing I want to point out about this one. It is a banger because it was a fight. It wasn't just a one-way mauling. Jourdain would throw a kick from southpaw, like a left high kick or whatever, and Arosa would either parry it across his body with his left hand or scoop under it and pull it across his body. And the first few times he was able to do that, he had Jourdain jump back all the way to the fence. I think in Thailand they call it ploughing the field or something, don't they? Or sweeping the ring, where you get the foot and you just drive the opponent back on one leg. And he was able to do that and then dig body shots along the fence against Jourdain, which I really liked. But he was also having great success with the uppercut, which was really interesting because he was the taller man. And Jourdain was fighting quite upright as well, which was even more interesting. But he was able to use the right uppercut to the body. And then also when he caught the kick or went to parry the kick. So if Jourdain would throw a left high kick and Arosa would he'd take it on his right forearm, come across with his left hand and start parrying the kick, the foot across himself. And after doing that a couple of times, Jourdain sort of squared up and let the foot go across his body, but stayed square. As opposed to letting his whole leg be dragged and himself be turned around. So he's standing on one leg and his foot is being pulled to his middle line. And so Arosa does that parry to the middle line and then just drops it and hits him with an uppercut where he's standing on one leg. It was fantastic. But yeah, tons of great uppercuts, body work, particularly in the third round, because Jourdain comes back really well in the second round, does some great work with punching off the fence. He has this, it's something about pressure fighters. A lot of them are the sort of fighters who will go forward, and then take a step back when you come at them, and then try and come in forward again. And Jourdain was able to catch Arosa a lot of the times as he was going straight backwards, just by really like running through with it. But in the third round, Arosa had phenomenal success with collar tie, elbows and knees. Hit him with like 3 or 4 knees straight to the body in a row, undefended. And, you know, when you can see all the air coming out of someone. But then the finish is phenomenal too, because Arosa takes him down by the fence. Jourdain scoots on his hands and butt back to the fence to start walking up. He's in it, like it's at the point where he's inevitably going to get to his feet or to a knee again. And Arosa lets go of him, lets him go from on his butt to on a knee in his hands, and uppercuts in a Darce choke. Something that I've seen Vicente Luque do too, like let the guy move and grab the Darce as he tries to stand up. And that's the finish. But the whole fight is absolutely cracking fun. Technical, exciting, back and forth, well worth your time. And I think it was on an undercard, so you might not have seen it. Let's trade that off with a clanger. I'm going to go with Zhang. 1FC's... what division is that in 1FC? Hold on. She's the 1 strawweight champion, but the 1 strawweight division is 125 pounds as opposed to 115 pounds. There we go. That's the logic of it. And I mentioned her a couple of weeks ago because I said this week, you know, we're going to start pretending that, or people are going to start telling you that she's one of the top women's strawweights in the world. And she ain't. Basically, I mean, there was a lot of anticipation on... She beat Angela Lee back in the day at strawweight, which was a really good fight. Stayed in there for 5 rounds, finished her with a body kick. Awesome stuff. Lost the rematch by rear naked choke again in the 5th round, but that was at atom weight. Amazing how Angela Lee can fight at like 3 weight classes despite all that hydration testing and so on. But this year... Oh no, it was this year and last year. But last year she fought Tiffany Teo, who is a jiu-jitsu girl who doesn't have any striking. And Tiffany Teo basically went even with her in a kickboxing match, as they both just sort of pumped 1-2s. And then this year she fought Michele Nicolini. Now, that's the reason that this is in here. Basically, it's this fight, Michele Nicolini versus Zhang Nan. Because Michele Nicolini had just beaten Angela Lee in 2019, July. But when you beat a good or a 1-star, you get put on the shelf as punishment, it seems. We're going to get into this with Adriano Moraes later. But Angela Lee, Demetrius Johnson, straight back into action in big fights, you know, favourable to them, with a name, tons of promotion. Whereas Adriano Moraes, Michele Nicolini, fuck off. Not going to see you for a year. So Michele Nicolini beats Angela Lee in 2019 in this sort of like number 1 contender fight. She's supposed to have a title fight. Ends up happening in September 2021. Michele Nicolini is almost 41 years old. She's a jiu-jitsu legend, but she is almost 41 years old. And the difference between her and the Angela Lee fight and this one was astonishing. She came in and she gassed out before the end of the 1st round. It was... I've never seen anything like it. She obviously wasn't training or couldn't train properly for this fight, perhaps. I don't know how things are or were with her training setup, but it was just bizarre to watch this girl I've watched fight really well before come in like no shape to compete. And then Zhang Nan threw a jab and an overhand in answer to everything. And Michele Nicolini's reaching out with her head high up in the air. She's doing the old... You know, when a jiu-jitsu guy came over to Vale Tudo or MMA or whatever, and he'd have his chin in the air and he'd be reaching out for the punches. Michele Nicolini's doing that the entire time. The worst punch for that is the overhand, because it comes in over the top, catches your chin high in the air. And so Zhang Nan just throws that over and over and over again, doesn't ever actually do any damage or hurt her. It was a terrible performance for Michele Nicolini from like a professionalism standpoint. It was a terrible performance from Zhang Nan because she couldn't finish a girl who gassed in the 1st round and was there for every punch. Now, unlike the other clangers, I might recommend you actually watch that because it's hilarious. But, yeah, not a good one. And one that I'd sort of been looking forward to. I was like, oh, Zhang Nan, she's pretty good. Michele Nicolini, love watching her grapple. Always, you know, the strawweight division is the strongest division in women's MMA. I'm always willing to give it time. But no, this was just disastrously bad. Back to the bangers. Dricus du Plessis versus Trevin Giles. This was great. I'm a big Dricus du Plessis fan. I saw someone say like, "Oh, that guy that Jack Slacks was saying is going to be the next champion or whatever." I was like, "No, Dricus du Plessis is nowhere near that good. he's just fun." He does have a win over Roberto Soldic, who is legitimately like very scary talent. But Dricus du Plessis is billed as having like this great kickboxing background or whatever and being a knockout artist, and he is a knockout artist. But you watched him in this fight. Trevin Giles is like a hands low, bouncy in the out sort of striker. Dricus du Plessis is both hands locked to his jawline. And then the moment that Trevin Giles does anything, Dricus du Plessis like closes his eyes and reaches wildly and turns away from punches. The dude seems like a guy who's never been punched before. It's incredible. And then to contend with Giles is like smooth in and out bouncing, point fighty sort of style. Dricus du Plessis is like, I'm going to do some run up jump kicks. And like he's running into jump kicks. He's loading everything up with a day's march ahead of it. He's throwing right hands and turning his back on the guy like Junior dos Santos. But then the grappling is quite smooth. He takes him down off a nice high crotch into double leg off the fence. Giles manages to reverse position, but then Dricus du Plessis fights out of a back body lock with a Kimura and turns him all the way over, gets top position. But the end of the fight is hilarious because Dricus du Plessis backs onto the fence, like hands high, covering up and grimacing, expecting Giles to come in. Giles comes in, doesn't really like attack, it's more like a jump in for a feint. And Dricus du Plessis comes off the fence with a 1-2 with his head high in the air, not looking at the guy, and knocks him out. It's fucking incredible. So by no means a technical masterclass, but if you like weird fights that are exciting, Dricus du Plessis versus Trevin Giles is one for you. Which brings us back to the Clangers, and I'm going to go with the most requested fight for this award, whatever we're doing. But one of the most recommended ones was Thiago Santos versus Johnny Walker. For obvious reasons, we came in going, well, Thiago Santos is a big banger. It's one of the highest knockout rates over the last few years. Johnny Walker is a wild man. He's not the best fighter in the division, but he can knock out almost anyone, it seems, by doing weird shit. He's going to get in there and get redacted. But what actually happens was that the two had a really boring staring contest with the odd kick thrown in. And Johnny Walker was working with John Kavanagh, and every time they went back to the corner, Kavanagh was like, yes, more feints, less real strikes, more feints. Just dreadful. Everyone was hoping for, it's not a good division. We're not hoping for a technical masterclass, but we are hoping that they'll get the fuck after it and beat each other up a bit. But equally, that's not the way to have a long, successful career in mixed martial arts. So both of them don't really want to do that nowadays. I think that one really speaks for itself because you all saw that. That's it's not like when we're doing the bangers, we're talking about fights that a lot of people haven't seen. Back into the bangers, Nchukwi versus Rodriguez. I think I've raved about this one. This one just snuck up on me out of nowhere. But Tifon Nchukwi versus Slow Mike Rodriguez. Mike Rodriguez is sort of a flawed fighter, but a decent guy in the sort of middle of the pack. His flaws have been like the footwork. A lot of the time he tends to circle around like right on the fence, despite being a very tall, long guy. So if he takes even like half a step back, he's going to hit the fence. And Tifon Nchukwi used that masterfully. This was a great performance from him. And it was very, I don't want to say Matt Brown-like, but it was Matt Brown-like in that he was using the clinch, he was using elbows, he was using trips from the clinch. The elbows were the main thing. He was just doing phenomenal work with elbows. He'd enter with some like big swinging punches, and then Mike Rodriguez would like grab a double collar tie or whatever because he was the taller man, and he'd go back onto the fence and grab Nchukwi's head while Nchukwi was swinging around him, and then Nchukwi would frame off him with frame across the neck and slide an elbow in, or he'd start working into a collar tie of his own or an over tie and elbowing from there, hit the body well from there, and again, like I said, hit some nice trips. It was just you don't see an awful lot of effective clinch work through the rounds, and I thought that was really impressive. And Nchukwi really built for it too, just a fucking tank at that weight. It was quite frustrating watching Rodriguez do the wrong thing over and over again, though, because his corner just kept saying, stop trying to knee him. That's the worst thing you can do in this position, because he's getting his back put to the fence, and then as Nchukwi comes in, Rodriguez will stand on one leg and try and knee him, which is the last thing you want to do because you want to be able to move. You want to be running and trying to throw punches. Back in the Clangers, Menifield versus Knight is like the polar opposite of Nchukwi versus Rodriguez. Because Nchukwi versus Rodriguez, two big lads, managed to have a good, fun clinch fight out of it. And, they were billed as bangers too. So even though they were bangers and they had a long, grindy clinch fight, it was a fun clinch fight. Whereas Menifield and Knight, both of them billed as knockout artists. I said, this is the fight for the Black Explosive title. And then they got in there, and there was about a minute of really good action throughout the fight, but then there was an awful lot of leaning on the fence. And I can't remember who was reffing. He just let them do it. He had no interest in stopping them. It wasn't like they were working really effectively. We could have done with Mark Goddard being like, it's a fight, gentlemen. But yeah, I want to say a bit of letdown, very much a letdown. Real clanger. Back in the bangers, can't believe I'm doing this one, but Nate Landwear versus Ludovic Klein. I was well impressed by this. I think I spent a while on the podcast saying this, but in case you haven't watched it yet, I was very impressed by this because Nate Landwear is a meme fighter. He's got a funny voice. He's got an awful hairline that he insists on like not shaving his head, and he fights like he is a knockout artist, but he doesn't have any power and he moves like he's made out of wood. But in this fight, he actually it was where the fight was taking place. It was his shot selection. He didn't look that much faster or slicker or more powerful, but he did seem to be fighting smarter. And then he'd duck in on takedown attempts and create grappling exchanges when he could. And he actually got a submission out of it with a Darce. And even better, he was quite funny and charming at the post-fight interview. And I completely turned the corner on him. I was like, fucking hell, I like Nate Landwear now. Because just before this, he'd been smashed by Julian Arosa with a flying knee in seconds. And he was like 2 fights removed from being smashed by, I think it was Herbert Burns in a few seconds as well. I'm not saying he's going to be a world beater or anything, but it was cool to see a guy who definitely doesn't ooze the Dom Cruz cerebral fight analysis essence from his pores, but has clearly gone back and looked at what was going wrong, said, clearly I'm not the fastest, I'm not the strongest, I'm not the most explosive, but how can I get myself into a fight with these people or keep myself in a fight in a safer way? And obviously Klein is not Arosa and is not Herbert Burns, but as a fight, I thought Landwear looked a lot better, and it was just completely unexpected because it wasn't a particularly strong card, and I was going, fucking hell, Nate Landwear, and then he just had a great fight. So yeah, check that one out. Back in the Clangers, Nico Price versus Cowboy Oliveira. A lot of people agreed with this sentiment. I think it's probably because we just expected a real fun fight out of that one, and a real chaotic one. And also, both of them seemed on better behavior than a lot of the times they're fighting. There was a little bit of cheating, but it wasn't like Cowboy Oliveira is the most notorious cheat in the UFC. And Nico Price is also pretty bad for like eye pokes and groin kicks and fence grabs and things like that. Well, I mean, I basically just listed all the fouls that matter. But yeah, and also both are exciting fighters. Nico Price, submission artist, knockout artist. Cowboy Oliveira, pretty decent at finishing people. And it just didn't turn out that way. I'm not going to say... I mean, it wasn't Johnny Walker versus Thiago Santos, but it just was a bit of a letdown. For banger number 5, I'm going with a women's fight, which I suppose will surprise some people, but Ariana Carnelosi versus Na Liang. Real clash of builds, because while Na Liang is only 5'5", she did tower over Carnelosi, who is absolutely yoked and 5'2". I mean, Miranda Maverick's been doing a lot of body positivity stuff, but like if you look at Carnelosi's shoulders and arms, you're going, ooh, how recently did you enter the testing pool? She is absolutely yoked, like Gleison Tebow levels of lateral raises. But they had such an entertaining scrap. It was all over the place. Guard getting reversed, wrestling, banging it out on the feet. It was just really fun, and there was the very famous, I called it the bowling ball butt drag, because this Gnarling grabs a hold of a leg and to come off the bottom, and Carnelosi just reaches over, and it's like shocker levels of grab, and like lifts her up by the arse, like her arse is over her head as she pulls on this butt drag. But that's funny, and then the rest of the fight was actually really, really fun. So check that one out. Now, it'd be remiss to not mention Rozenstruik versus Gane in our Clangers list. I remember getting quite excited for this one. I mean, if you go back and listen to the pre-fight pod, I mean, why would you ever do that for a fight this bad? But if you go back and listen to the pre-fight pod for that event back in February, I was very positive. I was like, this is a really interesting matchup. You got like two of the best technical kickboxers in the UFC. You know, one's a lot more accomplished in like a pure kickboxing context, but Gane is clearly one of the most technical strikers in heavyweight MMA. And I went into it for like 20 minutes on that pod, and all the comments were like, "You're being very optimistic there, Jack. Do you know Jairzinho Rozenstruik, the guy who did nothing against Alistair Overeem?" Yeah, and then, you know, wouldn't you know, he came out and he did nothing, and Gane, yeah, he won the fight, but it wasn't particularly entertaining. Because that's the thing about Rozenstruik. He's dangerous enough that you have to sort of be careful if he doesn't do anything, but he's also so reluctant to do anything on his own turn, or like to force anything, to create his own openings, that he won't do anything. So if you're confidently just picking at him and poking at him, he's never going to come back at you and be like, right, I've got to get something back now. Really just devastatingly boring fight. And the really devastating part is that, like, the fight after that, Rozenstruik goes and sparks Augusto Sakai like it was nothing, so that everyone goes, oh, well, it was just an anomaly that he had a boring fight. You're like, no, it's two in his like last five now that he's just had absolute stinkers, and it was conveniently like the best technical strikers that he's fought. Really disappointing stuff. And they just put him on a main card to fight Marcin Tybura, and I bet that's going to be like co-main event. Fucking hell, that's going to be bad. Banger number 6, going to fly over to Bellator for a rare, good Bellator main event. And a rare, good Bellator heavyweight old man main event. Get your head around that one. But Czech Kongo and Sergey Kharitonov had a good little scrap. And more than anything, I was really impressed by Czech Kongo. And I believe I led with this on the podcast that week. And I got the sense that nobody cared. but now, as we're doing fights that you might not have seen, that you should probably check out, I'm going to say this is a really surprising. I know I'm saying it. I hear myself saying, Czech Kongo fight, it was good. But you got to believe me. It's, I thought Sergey Kharitonov was going to walk him down, batter him along the fence, because Czech Kongo does so much circling along the fence, particularly in recent years. You know, Ryan Bader had no trouble just like ducking in on his hips along the fence. The person who had real trouble with it was Vitaly Minakov, who forgot how to lead with his left hand. He could only throw his right hand, so Czech Kongo just circled away from his right hand, and Minakov kept throwing it and like chasing him around the cage, and Kongo would be away from him before he even got close. It was a really weird fight. But this one, Kongo's changing direction. He's getting away from Kharitonov, but Kharitonov's doing good work with a jab. He's doing a nice dipping jab. It was like when Nog jabbed him up. He's just coming in behind this stubby jab, and it's shaking Kongo's legs every time it connects. But then Kongo starts hitting the body, and he starts hitting the body with some straight punches, but also he's moving around the ring, and then he's timing Kharitonov's step in with an intercepting knee. Now, if you know anything about Kongo's kickboxing career, it's kind of the same as Cyril Gane's, where his hands didn't really do much for him in kickboxing. It was all step-up lead leg kicks and knees, and particularly like collar tie knees he was great at. And then coming over to MMA, people were like, oh, watch out for his hands. He's a K1 kickboxer. But Gane's actually developed this like incredible southpaw jab. But Kongo's hands have never been that special in MMA. But his knees have always been banging. And he was timing these stepping knees beautifully on Kharitonov. And when you know it, very quickly, Kharitonov's puffing. And that's a sort of like another one of those like live by the sword, die by the sword examples. We always say like good offensive fighters pick techniques that they know are difficult to defend, and it means that they probably have difficulty defending them. From Bas Rutten's obsession with leg locks to all sorts of other things. But it took circling and low kicking to take out John Jones. But Kharitonov and bodywork is another great example. Kharitonov just rips into people with the right hook to the body. As soon as Kongo starts coming back and hitting with knees to the body, he very quickly runs out of puff. Returning to the Clangers, a lot of people were very disappointed with Dariush versus Ferguson. I don't know how you can be. Or I mean, No, that's a bit cruel. I will go into what I mean there. But the Tony Ferguson thing, like we saw him against Charles. Well, clearly he lost a step against against Justin Gaethje. We all saw that, but it was kind of like, this is the first big hitting counterpuncher who he can't take down that he's fought. So it seemed like it could have been like a convergence of really bad skills that he came up against. But the Charles Oliveira one, Charles just manhandled him. No difficulty at all. Tony's stuck on the bottom trying to do buggy chokes and shit. But this Dariush one, I was very pessimistic. I was like, I would like to see Tony Ferguson take a step down in competition, not guys who are ascending right now, should be top 10, top 5, whatever. But a lot of people were expecting this to be Tony surprising everyone and getting back in the win column. And as it was, he couldn't really do anything. He was as ineffective as he was against Charles Oliveira and Justin Gaethje. It's been basically, he's kind of had a quieter Tyron Woodley fall off because he's lost basically every round since that first round of the Gaethje fight. We said it before, but play back the Barboza fight. Look at the speed that Tony's moving at and compare it to even the Pettis and Cerrone fights, but especially like the Gaethje fight, and the Oliveira fight, the brief moments on the feet in that one. The man has lost a step quite severely. But he's going to be booked into fights and people are going to keep going in and being like, this is where Tony shows people he's still got it. And, he will eventually win one, but I think you've got to stop. It was billed as like a marquee fight, and I don't think Tony Ferguson is in the position to be a marquee name anymore, or be a marquee name and not disappoint. A fight that I thought really flew under the radar that was just solid, all-round good MMA was Kai Kamaka III versus TJ Brown. I said it at the time, but it just had a bit of everything. Both guys cracked each other with momentum shifts. Both guys looked on the verge of finishing at a couple of points. The grappling was good. There was some lovely Kimura work from the bottom. There were some lovely takedowns and some good top play. It was just, I was watching it going, these are two young up-and-comers who know what they're doing. And sadly, they cut Kamaka off that loss, even though it was a very good, spirited fight. And Kamaka's now in Bellator, I think, and Brown is still in the UFC. But, in terms of, good fights you missed, that's a very solid entry. Don't have a lot more to say about that other than watch it. It was fun. Clangers. Brady versus Chiesa is one that a lot of people were very disappointed by because Chiesa is so limited on the feet, and Brady... Well, it was sort of like Brady was being billed as Chiesa plus a rounded game, plus hitting power. He's Chiesa plus. And Chiesa just showed him to be like, no, we're actually pretty similar. We both, he's strong and he can go hard for the first round and a half or 2 rounds, but he's not that much better, in terms of roundedness. Chiesa looked fine on the feet. Chiesa really drew it back towards the end of the fight. It wasn't a terrible fight, I would say, as it was supposed to be like the Sean Brady coronation. It's a bit of a clanger, but this is just one that a lot of people recommended. I could see why, if you went in expecting Sean Brady to be the next big thing, you'd be very disappointed. But there's still time, the book's not written on Sean Brady, and Chiesa honestly has pleasantly surprised me in the last year or two. That Vicente Luke fight, I thought he looked fantastic, until he got submitted, obviously. He could be a guy who benefited from some lower competition for a while because he had those sort of 3 gimmies back to back. Whatever's happening, UFC brass fucking love Michael Chiesa. Back to bangers. Oh, Moraes versus Demetrius Johnson. Another one that you... we just did a Bellator one. I'm doing a 1FC one. Probably if you saw one FC fight this year or one championship fight this year, this will be it. Because it was, a lot of people gave it their upset of the year or whatever. There's been a sort of, a huge amount of reductionism? Just trying to, reduce the accomplishment of Moraes here. And I think it's bullshit. If you had been watching MMA for a while and you saw Demetrius Johnson's one championship run, you could comfortably say, he's lost a bit of a step. But he's still Demetrius Johnson. He's technically phenomenal. He's still incredibly quick. I wouldn't like his chances in a third fight against Cejudo back when he was fighting guys like, when he was fighting guys like Yuya Wakamatsu and Tatsumitsu Wada. They were putting in better performances than people expected against him because everyone expected DJ to be the king. And I was watching and going, yeah, no, he's still clearly DJ. I wouldn't pick him in like a third match against Henry Cejudo, because this is at the time that Henry Cejudo's like smashing through or coming back to smash through Moraes and beating Dominic Cruz. But he's still very good, And then there was some fuckery to, if you're not familiar with one championship, they wanted Danny Kingad in the tournament. He had to win in the Philippines and get through to the next round. So they let him beat Reese McKee? Reese something or other. When Reese was just starting all over him. Danny Kingad is from Team Lakai, so he cannot stop a takedown. So then he fought Demetrius Johnson, and wouldn't you know it, he couldn't stop a fucking takedown. But that was the tournament final for some reason. And so DJ was fighting for the one flyweight championship against Adriano Moraes. Adriano Moraes was already the one champion. The tournament was to win a shot at him or something. And Moraes was an interesting fighter coming up to that. He'd had losses to Gaethje Eustaquio, rather, who I think is a Team Lakai guy. But yeah, he's been decent. But when DJ and Moraes fought each other, yes, there was a very big height disparity, and Moraes is very tall for that weight class. And I thought he used that wonderfully. He kept the distance. He used nice long kicks. He stayed off the fence, which was very important, because the last thing you want is DJ level changing on you on the fence, and then you just getting stuck there for the whole round. Trying to land counter uppercuts and things as DJ comes in and puts his head in the center of his chest. But ultimately, not a lot happened in that first round. And I think that was to Moraes' credit, because obviously Demetrius Johnson is a guy who makes lots of things happen and overwhelms people. Second round, Moraes gets on top, half guard. DJ goes for an underhook get up. Very standard move. But with the knees to the head being legal, Moraes hops around the corner, knees him in the head as one of his hands is on the ground, scores the knockout. Moraes has done this to other people before. I think it was Riku Shibuya. He did it twice. Like, once he kneed him on the way up and once he kicked him in the head on the way up. But yeah, it's something that he's been doing for a little while. And yeah, that's the change of rules and whatever. But I mean, DJ's been fighting there for a couple of years now. He's had 4 or 5 fights under that rule set. He's used knees from that position. So pretending like, oh, he's just never seen it before or whatever. But the really crazy stuff was pretending that, like, Adriano Moraes is a giant, one are trying to screw DJ. No, Demetrius Johnson's coach is the guy in charge of one's rules and regulations. I don't get how people don't know this. And it's not like he could screw DJ over for the money or whatever, because DJ worships him. Like, go and watch any interview with Demetrius Johnson about Matt Hume or with Matt Hume. Like, he sees him as like his dad. And the really stupid part is that, like, Matt Hume's been there doing the rules and regs forever before Demetrius Johnson got there. Adriano Moraes has made that weight forever. He has made the weight since the moment that they brought in their alleged hydration testing. There has never been a fight that he's missed weight. So, if you're saying like DJ's too small, yeah, they've got a strawweight class in one. He's not fighting there. The champion is Joshua Pacquiao, who you would imagine, because he can't stop a fucking takedown because he's Team Lakai, Demetrius Johnson would steamroll through. But no, he's fighting at the weight that he wants to fight at. But yes, go watch that fight. Adriano Moraes did a phenomenal job. And since then, they have booked Demetrius Johnson into a highly talented fight against Jourdain, which is completely pointless because it's 1 round kickboxing, 1 round MMA, or 1 round Muay Thai, 1 round MMA. And the only way that that's going to go is that Demetrius Johnson's going to circle for a round and then take him down the moment the second round starts. It's the only way these fights ever go. And Jourdain isn't going to learn to fight on the ground. But yeah, they booked DJ into that. They're making a huge deal out of it, even though it's obviously bullshit. And Adriano Moraes hasn't been seen or heard from ever since. Like, he turned up to pick up his award at the MMA fighting or the MMA awards or whatever for upset of the year, and everyone was like, "Oh, where you been, man?" Like, he's not been booked. It's fucking insane. I mean, granted, one doing events in Singapore has, they've been very limited with what they can do there, but I think they've been doing stuff in Vietnam or whatever. It's just crazy that you haven't heard from this guy in the full year, almost year since that happened. Under Clangers, I have every Douglas Lima fight because Douglas Lima, his second and third matches against Koreshkov, their little rivalry, really good. First fight, Koreshkov's taken him down really effectively with high crotches, head outside singles, whatever. Second fight, he comes back, knocks out Koreshkov. Third fight in 2018, he submits Koreshkov with a rear naked choke, knocks out Michael Page in the next fight, beats Rory McDonald in the fight after that. Should have beaten Rory McDonald in the first fight, but didn't do enough. And that was a glimpse into things to come, because ever since, he's done very little. Gegard Mousasi. Mousasi is not a monstrous hitter. Douglas Lima is a decent hitter. But, all that Mousasi was doing was poking him with the jab and then ducking into takedowns on the fence. And Lima was taking the jab and then just being like, oh no. He wasn't actually... He fought with zero urgency with his back foot to the fence the entire time. Fights Amosov, same thing happens. Fights Michael Page, does barely anything, is surprised when he loses the decision. If you'd watched him knock out Koreshkov, or if you'd watched him knock out Michael Page, you would come in expecting a banger every time that Douglas Lima fights. But no, he is not that fighter. And he's becoming less that fighter by the day. His fights this year against Amosov and Michael Page were not fun. And they were billed as like, oh, these are going to be shit-hot fights. And I'm running out of clangers because, it wasn't a huge year for fights, but there weren't too many like horribly disappointing, ultra-hyped fights. But what I'm going to do is 2 more bangers to bring it up to 10. And the first one is Valiev versus Barcelos. Raoni Barcelos has been around for a little in the UFC. And he's kind of like a Vicente Luque figure, where he's getting wins, he's getting finishes, he's racking them up, they're looking good, and you're going, why are we not pushing this lad like to the to high heavens? Why is he not fighting bigger names? He comes into the UFC against Kurt Holliber, knocks him out. This was July 2018. Submission in his next one, knockout in his next one, couple of decisions after that, Said Nurmagomedov and Khalid Taha. And then rather than moving up, he's fighting Timur Valiev, who has a no contest and a win in the UFC and has done nothing in the bantamweight division in the UFC. It's a really weird piece of matchmaking, but it was a fun fight. And Raoni Barcelos is a great hitter. He's got a terrific left hook. He's got all his punches are pretty good. He's a good boxer puncher. He's got good kicks. And Valiev met him punch for punch. They were standing in the pocket, trading blows. It was really very sharp boxing and counter-boxing for MMA. Not too many moments I want to touch on, not too many huge momentum shifts or anything like that. I'm just saying that's a really good fight, really high-level problem-solving with dire physical consequences. Let's call it that. But really fun. Raoni Barcelos, firstly, go and watch his work in the UFC since he got there, because he's been sparking people. And then watch this fight and go, damn, Timur Valiev just standing in the pocket with him and often outlanding him. And it wasn't a split decision, sorry, it was a majority decision, but it was a close enough fight. Absolute banger. Definitely worth your time if you enjoy a good technical scrap, as I'm sure you do if you're a listener to this podcast. And then final, number 10, Makdessi versus Bahamondes. I really enjoyed this. Makdessi is an old man, and also very small in terms of height and reach for that weight class. Bahamondes is a young lad coming up. He's from Chile, I think, and he's moved to the US to chase this dream or whatever. But he was towering over Makdessi. He's young. He's ready to go. It's his UFC debut. He missed weight by, I think it was 0.5 of a pound, which is not egregious. It's not coming in 5 pounds over and everyone going you didn't try, did you? This was a bullshit move. You're doing the sacrifice 20% of my purse to be massive. But, it was just a great fight because Bahamondes was trying to shoot 1-2s and throw high kicks and things and all the long man bullshit that you expect. And Makdessi was able to counterpunch, get his head in Bahamondes' chest. When they were out in the opening trading kicks, Makdessi was going even with him, trading kicks, which was great. It was just a really fun performance because Makdessi is probably not going to be setting the world on fire anymore. It's not like 7 or 8 years ago when we were all very hot on him. But he's still got enough to whoop some of these up-and-comers. And Bahamondes, a great sort of learning experience for him because he required toughness, and he at no point were you this guy's quitting or this guy's losing hope here. He fought the whole fight like he thought he was going to edge it, or not edge it, but he thought that he could edge it if he kept working. So there you go, 10 bangers, miscellaneous amount of clangers, things that you might not have seen this year, or things that you should watch again. We got fights coming up this weekend, and boy, am I happy to have them back. We got Giga Chikadze versus Calvin Kattar, fun little fight, and a couple of others on that card. There's a ONE FC event on, no Bellators this week. But then we're kicking right back into it. We've got a pay-per-view with Gane versus Ngan, his evil twin. We got some other good stuff on that card. Moreno versus Figueiredo 3. It's just, we're starting up again after a little off-season, and I couldn't be happier for it. But I will be back Wednesday, Thursday for the Boycast to talk about the fights coming up this weekend and other bollocks. Might review Disney's Encanto, or just sing some of the songs from it. And, if you want to sign up to the Patreon, support the podcast, listen to the Boycast, read the articles, do that. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to read what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack. Douglas Lima leaning on the fence in that flirty pose that Karolina Kowalkiewicz used to do and expecting to win rounds from there, bless.